In this video, we're going to rank every single LMG in Battlefield 6 into a tier list. Let me get a couple of universal things out of the way before we jump in, because otherwise I'd be saying this thing for every single entry and I want to respect your time. The direct competitors to the LMGs are the assault rifles, and while yes, we're technically only ranking the LMGs against each other, the relationship between the LMGs and the ARs does play a pretty significant role in how I figured out these rankings. That's mostly because the LMGs naturally have some penalties compared to the other weapon classes. They have the slowest aim down sights time, the slowest reload times, and most importantly the longest sprint to fire delay, which is actually something that will get you killed if you don't manage it properly. If you're going to be using an LMG, then it really only makes sense if it's in some way better than an assault rifle, otherwise why should you put up with the bad handling if you're not really getting anything good from it? Speaking of the penalties, by the way, you really should also be running the support class if you're planning to use an LMG. Not only does it completely remove that annoying movement speed penalty, which is pretty huge by itself, but it also actually improves your aim down sight speed. Those buffs are really appreciated, and I highly recommend playing support with an LMG. It's also currently probably the best class in the game in general. The first LMG you have access to in Battlefield 6 is the L110, and it's kind of a weird one. Initially when the game was first released, I wasn't a really big fan of this thing, and I think that's mainly because of how it felt with the bullet spread. Luckily though, DICE has at least partially fixed those bullet spread bugs, and things are feeling much better now. In its current form, the L110 is a perfectly acceptable LMG. It doesn't kill the fastest, but it's pretty accurate. It has access to all the usual attachments you'd be looking for, and it handles decently well with the right build. There really isn't anything all that special for me to talk about here. However, my big problem with it comes down to the comparison against a particular assault rifle. If you take a look at this, the L110 has 720 RPM, and it's a 4-shot kill to the body until 20 meters, and then a 5-shot kill all the way out to about 80 meters. That's the exact same damage model in RPM as the B36 assault rifle. With the same spread per shot increase and basically the same recoil, I have to ask, why not just use the B36? I mean, that thing handles way better, and it doesn't lock you into the support class. Sure, the B36 doesn't quite have 100 rounds in the magazine, but its reload is so much faster that that's not really that much of an issue. Now, the L110 is definitely a serviceable gun, and it's definitely not terrible, but being just okay is just not good enough in a highly competitive tier list. I don't think I can rank it all the way down in the D tier, but it's not going to go any higher than the C tier either. As I mentioned, getting matched or beaten by an assault rifle is just not a good look for an LMG, especially when there's so many great ones out there. So the next LMG would be the DRS-IAR, but for you to understand how I'm going to rank that one, I actually think it makes more sense if you saw my other rankings first for comparison. So actually, I'm going to skip this one for now and leave it for a bit later in the list where hopefully it makes things a bit more clear. The Division 1 was one of my favorite games of the past decade or so, and recently I started playing the Division 2 a bit again. Now usually I'm not a big mobile gamer, and when I see a full franchise get brought over to mobile, I kinda roll my eyes. But after putting around 15 hours so far into the Division Resurgence, I have to say I'm pretty impressed. This is a free-to-play Division game on mobile, and I'm actually pretty surprised by how much it feels like a real Division game. The gunplay is really solid, and the biggest thing for me is that you can just plug in a controller and play it. I hooked up my Xbox Elite controller and it worked instantly with no fuss. And suddenly, it didn't feel like one of those mobile shooters anymore, it felt like I was playing more of a portable version of a franchise I've already spent hundreds of hours enjoying in the past. There's a lot here to dive into. You've got the full loot system, gear upgrades, specializations, a shared open world with other players, some co-op missions, and even a version of the Dark Zone. This is not just some stripped down experience, it has a lot of depth to it. Now yeah, it still does of course have some of the typical mobile game stuff like daily rewards and menus, but I've been playing completely free to play so far with no funds invested, and I really haven't felt limited at all. If you're traveling or just on the couch and you want to play a game without booting up your console or your PC, I think this is a pretty solid option. So if you want to check it out, you can use the link in the description to download it and try it out for yourself. So the next traditional LMG on our list is the M60. This thing has the slowest firing rate of all of them, but it does have the beefier damage model of the 3 bullets to kill up close and then 4 bullets to kill from further away. It's also relatively accurate, has nearly completely vertical recoil, and it starts you off with 100 bullets in the magazine. That would be a great thing if there wasn't already an even better magazine option later on. Nonetheless, in general with the LMGs reloading so slowly, magazine size actually does significantly contribute to this particular LMG rating. If you're pretty familiar with the assault rifles in Battlefield 6, I'm gonna guess you can probably immediately see one of them as the M60's body double. That would be the AK-4D. Once again, it's an assault rifle with the exact same RPM, exact same damage model, and even way better handling. So this means I probably should rank the M60 pretty low, right? After all, the AK-4D performing exactly the same is not a great look. Well, actually, there is one thing that the M60 has going for it which kinda saves it from the abyss of the D tier. You see, the 50 round belt on the M60 actually has a massive boost for the aim down sight speed. I know I just said that the small magazines are generally kinda bad for LMGs, but out of all the smaller belts, this one actually gives you the biggest benefits from them. Since the M60 can down a player in just 3 shots, you actually get a lot of work done with just those 50 bullets. If you can equip the light barrel, a stubby grip, and the small magazine, and then run the support class, you can get an aim down sight speed which is almost on par with the assault rifles. So in a shocking turn of events, the M60 is actually somewhat of a viable alternative to the AK-4D. You're basically trading a slower reload speed and a longer sprint to fire delay for a huge magazine and slightly less recoil. So depending on your playstyle, I could see that as a valid trade-off. With a hollow point setup, you can turn the M60 into a 2-tapping monster which can then absolutely take points off of even the most lethal guns in the game, including the TR7 and the SCW-10. Unfortunately though, you can also get killed pretty quickly. I have kind of the same problem with this thing as the AK-4D, which is that missing just a single bullet will put you at a pretty big disadvantage because of that slow rate of fire. So while yes, you can sneak away with a win against some of the better options even in a clear 1v1 fight, you also have a pretty high likelihood to die against many of the worst weapons because of the slower rate of fire. So all in all, I'm going to rank this thing next to the L110 in the C tier. It's definitely not terrible, but I just don't vibe with these really slow RPM weapons. Next up is the RPKM, and for some inexplicable reason, I see this thing getting picked way too often by players all over the place. I'm sorry to disappoint you, but I just don't think this thing's all that good. To be clear, basically any gun in this game is pretty well balanced overall, and so you can perform great with just about anything. But with that said, we're here to rank these guns in a list and compare them, and the RPK just has a few major issues to address. Okay, so before I get to roasting it, let me at least mention that it kinda does have at least technically something good going for it. It has a fairly low recoil, which makes it pretty easy to shoot, and it also has pretty decent handling as well. So to understand exactly why the RPK performs pretty poorly compared to its competitors, we need to look at that damage model. In game, the tooltip suggests that the RPK is a 3-shot kill up close, and that's technically correct, but there's a caveat. The 3-shot kill range is only out to about 10 meters. Then immediately after the 10 meter mark, the RPK falls off to a 4-shot kill, and then at 20 meters it's a 5-shot kill, and at that point you can pretty much just forget about this gun. At just 553 RPM, that's an absolutely awful kill time paired with a brutally unforgiving rate of fire. Now truth be told, the RPK does get access to synthetic ammo, which would allow you to kill in 3 headshots at just about any range, and DICE actually specifically tweaked the damage model of this gun to make the bullets very slightly more effective on it. That means you need just one more headshot to reduce your time to kill at most ranges. But good luck landing that headshot because the RPK actually has higher bloom than most other guns with a comparable damage model. Once again, the final nail in the coffin for the RPK actually comes from the assault rifles, because if you remember my assault rifle tier list, you might remember that there's another assault rifle which I personally loved and had the exact same damage model as the RPK. That would be the NVO. It has the same exact damage model at all ranges, but this time the AR actually shoots 100 RPM faster and it handles better. And unlike the M60, the RPK really doesn't have any saving grace compared to the absolutely superior NVO. So although it's decent in the fields department with a kind of low recoil, I just don't really think this is a very competitive weapon. It's pretty bad compared to the M60, it's bad compared to the L110, and it's strictly worse than the NVO at pretty much every range. So why would you ever use this thing? Well, answer is you probably shouldn't. This thing's gonna go in the D tier. Okay, this tier list started off a little bit rough, but I promise some of these coming up are definitely worth your time. The next one on the list is the M123K, and this one kind of makes me scratch my head. That's because in all the time I've been playing Battlefield 6, I've really rarely seen anyone kill me with this thing, even though it's actually really good. It has the same damage model as the L110, but shoots at 830 RPM, so that's 110 RPM faster. It still kills in 4 shots up close up to 20 meters, and then falls off to a 5-shot kill until around 80 meters. As you can probably tell, that's been kind of a trend with most of the LMGs. They generally have 3 damage ranges. One that goes out to about 20 meters, the second one to 80 meters, and then the third is pretty much anything beyond 80 meters. So at every one of those ranges, your gun will require 1 more body shot to get the kill. The slower firing LMGs typically require 3 shots to kill and then go to 4 and then 5, and the faster firing LMGs start off at 4 and then go to 5 and then 6. The best way to understand the M123K's rating is to compare it against the other ARs, and in this case the mirror matchup is the M433. That assault rifle also shoots at 830 RPM, and it also kills in 4 bullets up close with the exact same damage model. With the recent buff, the M433 has gotten a lot better recoil, but it's still a bit more jarring and unpredictable than the M123K, which is able to beam players from an absolutely ridiculous distance. Unfortunately, the spread per shot increase and moving accuracy are the same, so the difference in shooting performance is pretty small. But ultimately, the M123K is better at all ranges in terms of accuracy. At 830 RPM with a 4 to 5 shot kill, that's extremely powerful. We're talking a sub 0.3 second time to kill at all ranges, and even if you miss, there are 100 bullets in your magazine to finish the job. Unfortunately, DICE did foresee that this thing could be pretty strong, and so they made an effort to balance it by removing some of the better handling attachments. So unlike some of the other LMGs, the M123K can't quite get as good of handling without sacrificing at least some of the recoil attachments. Most notably, I'd really like to see the light barrel on this thing, because that barrel not only buffs your aim down sight speed, but also helps with your aim down sight accuracy. The only thing we get on the M123K is the short barrel, and while that does help with the ADS time, its other benefit is also the hipfire accuracy. Now again, it seems clear to me that DICE intentionally gave most of the LMGs really bad hipfire accuracy to stop you from circumventing the really bad handling by just hipfiring everybody. This is a balancing act because once again, if they didn't do this, the LMGs would be miles better than most of the other weapon classes. In general, the LMGs both kill fast and accurately, which would have been terrible for the balance of the game if they didn't at least try to offset that incredible performance by slightly nerfing the handling department. And we can see that balancing effort in effect on the M123K. In any case, the point I was trying to make is that with this thing, half of the short barrel is kind of a waste because by design, you really can't get great hipfire with most of the LMGs anyway. Opting for the heavy barrel that improves that sustained accuracy and then choosing a grip which helps the ADS speed is more than enough. This makes the M123K handle sufficiently good to the point where even if you're caught off guard, it doesn't really take ages before your gun's ready to fire. The biggest problem of this thing is if you want to help that terrible sprint to fire time, you have to either go with the full angle grip, which penalizes your moving accuracy, or the slim hand stop, which doesn't give you any recoil control. Now don't get me wrong, with the correct playstyle, you can mitigate all of these issues. If you're playing positionally and holding on areas, you can absolutely mow down people who are running at the objectives. But if you're chasing people down and trying to jump on them while you're running around, well, that's gonna get you killed with that awful sprint to fire time. You just have to work around the balancing decisions that DICE implemented, which is why I can't really rank this thing all the way in the S tier, but it's pretty darn close in the A tier. Oh, and before I move over to the next LMG, let me quickly draw your attention to one of the magazine options for the M123K, the 200 round belt. You might be wondering what could possibly be the purpose of such a hilariously oversized magazine. Well, I have one idea for it. Now to be fair, almost every belt-fed LMG can do this with the maximum size belt, but I feel like this is the most realistic to pull off with the M123K because it has such a high RPM while also giving you those 200 bullets to work with. Next up is the M250, and this one's kind of a tragedy. You'll see what I mean in a second, but let me first explain what could have made this thing exceptional. You see, the M250 has kind of a trick up its sleeve. It doesn't get damage fall off. I actually think it just keeps hitting that 25 damage to the body almost always. At 675 RPM, that means you're going to be able to get a 0.26 second time to kill basically forever. That's amongst the fastest range kill time of all weapons in the game, and it can be exactly as broken and overpowered as that sounds. It's certainly one of the most consistent LMGs at any longer ranges. Now, if you watched my carbine tier list, the M277 also had a 4-shot kill out to ridiculous ranges, which was partially balanced by its crazy recoil and the only 20 bullets in the magazine. The way DICE balanced the M250 is that it has a slightly higher bloom as well as a smaller magazine. Now, I don't really think that the recoil or the bloom of the M250 is a particularly big issue here. Sure, it was the target of a recent nerf from DICE, but the M250 is still way more consistent at range than M277 or the TR7. The magazine size, however, that's a pretty serious problem. DICE clearly knew that the M250 was extremely good, so they attempted to balance it by only giving it 50 rounds in the magazine. That's pretty small for a belt-fed machine gun. In fact, it's the smallest space magazine of any of them. It also doesn't come with any of the nice handling or reload benefits of the 50 round belt on the M60. So for a very long reload time of nearly 6 seconds, the M250 will force you to completely dip out of the action every few kills. In my eyes, this is a pretty huge problem with the M250. Think about this, if you're trying to contest an objective, good luck finding a place to hide where you can safely spend 6 seconds doing absolutely nothing at all just to get a gun which is realistically only good for maybe 2, 3, 4 kills if you're lucky. The only larger magazine size for the M250 is the 100 round belt, which costs an absurd 55 points to equip. That's just way too much, and it locks you out of the desperately needed attachments like barrels, recoil control attachments, and most importantly suppressors. So the 100 round belt is kind of off the table for me, and there really aren't any good aim down sight attachments either besides the grip on the M250, so you're pretty much locked out of playing aggressively with it. That leaves you playing pretty passively and reloading all the time, and using the M250 in a game actually feels more like a reload simulator than a first-person shooter. It's technically better than the L110, which I think is kind of a boring copy pasta of an assault rifle and has really nothing special going for it, but despite the amazing range potential, the M250 in practice is really not all that good, so I'm going to rank it in the B tier. Next up we have a machine gun which has once again completely baffled me simply based on how many wrong opinions I see out there. I'm talking about the KTS 100 and the people who either think this is the best gun in the game for some reason or it's completely horrible. The whole gimmick of this thing is that it shoots like a laser beam, but that comes at the very high price of taking a whole bullet extra to kill than the M60. And that is horrible, there's really no other way to put it. The only saving grace of the KTS is the extremely small spread increase per shot, the nearly zero recoil, and the ability to get synthetic tip ammo. With this ammo upgrade, the KTS can pick up kills in 3 headshots under 80 meters, and with its amazing consistency, it can do that more reliably than any other gun in the game. But if you really want to play from far away, DMRs do exist, and they actually kill faster to the body anyway at pretty much all ranges. I'll admit, similar to the RPK, it does feel really great to shoot this thing because of the super low recoil, but it just takes so long to get a kill. When you swap between the KTS and other better LMGs, it's a night and day difference in the lethality department. So in my eyes, I don't really care how much you love that low recoil, the KTS is probably just not the right answer. If you want a laser beam gun, go get your hands on the L85 or the PW7, the KTS is just not all that good. This thing belongs all the way down in the D tier. Let's talk about the last LMG that you unlock from the challenge system, which is the M240L. And now we're really cooking. It's actually quite obvious why the M240 is a really good LMG, so we're going to spell it out. The M240 has the exact same damage model as the M60, but shoots at 600 RPM instead of 514. Yeah, it's that simple. Faster gun is a better gun, at least that's how most FPS games work. Well, okay, let me backtrack for just a second. It's not quite that simple, but it's pretty close. This thing does start off with just a 50 round belt, just like the M250, which would have been pretty bad if it wasn't for the fact that luckily the M240 has access to a medium-sized extended magazine option. That 75 round box actually even boosts your draw speed and aim down sight accuracy while moving, which is crucially important for the M240. You see, almost all the fully automatic guns which kill in 3 to 4 bullets, so stuff like the TR7, AK4D, the M277, M417, and so on, all of them have increased bloom. The M240 is no exception. That accuracy buff from the 75 round magazine is extremely welcome here and actually makes the M240 surprisingly consistent at landing its optimal kill time even at pretty far away. 75 bullets is also plenty enough for most engagements you're going to get into. With a slower rate of fire and that 3-shot kill up close, you can easily take out entire squads before you have to reload. The fact that the 75 round belt also only costs 10 points leaves you with plenty of space for other attachments. So before we get into the actual ranking, let me talk about the attachments I really do like, and the first one being hollow points. As with any 33 damage weapon, hollow point ammo enables you to kill your opponent in just 2 headshots up to the second damage range, which in the case of the M240 is 20 meters. If you manage to hit someone up close for just 2 headshots, you're going to be completely obliterating them in 0.1 seconds. That's like a superhuman kill time. It's even faster than the most elite gamers' reaction speed. Now looking at the other attachments, I'd set up the M240 to help with the main weaknesses of the LMGs as much as possible. That means we're looking for help with handling and aim down sight speed, ideally without penalizing our accuracy. Yet another good thing about the M240L is the fact that it's got the light barrel, which also helps the aim down sight speed and accuracy. With the newly added violet laser, the light barrel, and the buff from the 75 point magazine, the M240 gets a perfect 0.05 degree moving accuracy cone, which makes it the absolute best LMG for burst firing while moving, and you're basically guaranteed that your first shot is going to go exactly where you're aiming. As for the grip, I think the slim angled is convincingly the best one, because it gives us the benefit in all the areas where LMGs are really weak without any of the penalties. And finally for the barrel, if you don't mind skipping the suppressor, I really like that linear compensator because it completely removes any randomness from the recoil. Finish this off with a scope of your choice and the M240L is ready to shred your next lobby. With the improved accuracy, better sprint to fire, better ADS time, and marginally faster optimal kill time, the M240 gives the M123K a serious run for its money, and it comfortably establishes itself as the best belt-fed LMG in the entire game. So it goes into the S tier. Before we get to the DRS-IAR, let me tell you about the new LMG, which was just released in Season 2. You can get this thing from the 3rd Battle Pass category. So how good is this thing? Well, I'm not going to keep you waiting. The M121A2 is, albeit by a small margin, but still is the #1 most lethal LMG in the game, and pretty close to being the most lethal gun in the entire game. With a 3-shot kill up to 20 meters at 630 RPM, the M121 basically vaporizes anyone who dares to come close. Even further away, the 4-shot kill at 0.28 seconds is still a very fast time to kill. Really, the only competitors to this thing in terms of lethality are the TR7 and the new VCR. It's really good. Now, does that mean it goes automatically into the S tier? Well, DICE did have the foresight to balance this thing to make sure it doesn't completely ruin the balance of the sandbox. So while the M121 does have the best in class lethality, it also has close to the worst in class recoil, handling, reload speed, and magazine. Basically, the M121 is a trade-offer. You get the fastest possible time to kill with an LMG, but then you sacrifice pretty much every other convenience for it. This is a pretty tall order, especially considering that the M240 gets pretty much all the bells and whistles that you could wish for. And to give you a feeling for how small that RPM difference is, with the M121, the increased RPM lets you fire just 1 extra bullet every 12 shots compared to the M240. This tiny difference is really not worth all that suffering, which will be caused by the serious penalties that DICE imposed on the M121. If you don't get the light barrel and you don't get the aim down sights help from the magazine, you're stuck with way below average handling and base movement accuracy. Also, it doesn't get the 75 round magazine, and its 50 round magazine reloads painfully slow. And by the way, the 10-point fast mag is an absolute scam because it also hurts your sprint to fire speed, which is really important for LMGs. The in-game tooltip claims that the M121 is supposed to excel in close range, but if you have to be out of the fight with your pants down for over 6 seconds reloading in CQB, you're practically dead already. If you try to run up to people, the superior handling of SMGs, assault rifles, or god forbid shotguns will destroy you, regardless of how fast on paper the kill time is of the M121. And that terrible handling and magazine size effectively forces you to play kind of far away, where you'll be dealing with the worst in class recoil of the M121. Not to mention, if you actually want to contest an objective, you're going to get forced into CQC, where the tiny magazine size and horrible reload will also get you killed. So you're probably starting to get the picture. The M121 does one thing really well, but all the other difficulties that DICE put on this thing means you're going to have a significantly more mileage out of the M240 or the M123K. So for the M121, I'm going to put this thing next to the M250 in the B tier. And now it's time for the DRS-IAR. I've kept this one for last because it is really special. Since the DRS is unlocked so early, you might have already tried it at some point, and you probably would have noticed that it doesn't really fit into the mold of the usual LMG. Accordingly, I'm also going to give it a very special treatment here. So looking back at our tier list, most of the LMGs which were not quite as good compared to the similar assault rifles got ranked very poorly on this tier list. Those which were better tended to be massively better than the matching assault rifles, but at the cost of handling and the overall sluggish feeling. So now, how does the DRS fit into this picture? Well, it kinda doesn't. To get the feeling for where the DRS fits in the sandbox, let's compare it to just a couple of the other best LMGs and ARs. Well, compared to the L110, it shoots faster while being basically just as accurate, and compared to the M123K, it has way more handling and way more convenient reloads while shooting slightly slower. Looking at the assault rifles, the DRS has the same damage model and approximately the same accuracy as the B36, but it shoots 50 RPM faster. Compared to the M433, once again it shoots slower, but is way more controllable and way more consistent. So the DRS strikes this incredible balance of having faster rate of fire than the comparable weapons with the same accuracy and significantly reduced LMG penalties at the same time. You're way less likely to miss a bullet than with the more lethal options, while at the same time you just win out on time to kill against the more accurate options. So the DRS quite literally has zero downsides. It's just amazing at absolutely everything. It's even more universally powerful than the B36, which I ranked in the S tier for our assault rifle tier list. And I'm going to repeat this to be absolutely clear. There is no other gun in the entire game which is this good at every possible playstyle and every possible engagement range at the same time. It completely doesn't matter what distance you're fighting your opponent at. The DRS is always going to be among the best options in the entire sandbox. Up close it has above average lethality, far away it has above average accuracy, and in the medium ranges it's just the king. And if all the benefits I just mentioned don't sound good enough to you, the final cherry on the cake is that it actually gets synthetic ammo as well. The DRS is already exceptionally good at everything, but now it also has access to the highest possible headshot multiplier, enabling it to kill in 3 headshots all the way out to about 80 meters. I know, it's not really a good idea to rely on headshots in Battlefield 6, but when a gun which already is really good and doesn't need massive help from attachments gets access to this ammo, I don't see a reason really not to use it. Remember, most players in this game play pretty passively. You could say the game has a bit of a camper problem. Well, the DRS with synthetic tip ammo is the ultimate camper solution. If your opponent is standing still in some corner, landing 3 headshots is a cakewalk, and you'll delete them even faster than the TR7 could. Trust me, if you make any effort at all to aim for the upper chest area, you're going to find yourself being gifted kills you certainly didn't deserve. And hey, if you don't like synthetic ammo, no problem, the DRS still has you covered there. If you play slightly more passively, you can easily opt for a recoil control grip with the heavy barrel to get near pinpoint accuracy and dominate any engagement in medium to long ranges. Finally, if you're one of those people who like to get in there super heavy aggressively, the DRS also has you covered. You can pick the light barrel for extra handling and accuracy while moving and aiming down sights, the violet laser for even more accuracy while moving, and then finally something like the angled grip to give you even more handling and recoil control. This is the end-all be-all gun which has great handling, better than average kill times, excellent accuracy, minimal recoil, low bloom, and lower damage falloffs. What more could you possibly ask for? So after all this chat, what is the correct place to put this thing in our tier list? Well, I think the right place for this gun is actually on the throne as the #1 best gun in the game. I truly believe this thing stands out head and shoulders above all other weapons in Battlefield 6. Feel free to fight me on that in the comments. Subscribe if you enjoyed this video, and up next, check out my assault rifle tier list if you haven't seen that one yet. It's linked on screen and in the description.